My mom said it straight to my face, you couldn't just let your brother have half the place after finding out about my newly bought house. So I told her, no mom, I fully own what I paid for, period. I'm 31M, a cardiac nurse at one of the top hospitals in our state. I've been working in the cardiac ICU for 8 years now, and last month I helped save a 12-year-old girl's life during an emergency surgery. Her parents called me an angel. My own parents. They didn't even acknowledge the text I sent them about it. Let me paint you the full picture of my family dynamic. My brother Jake. 33M has been the golden child since the day I was born. He's charming, outgoing, the life of every party. He manages a popular bar downtown. And to hear my parents tell it, he's basically the second coming of Christ mixed with Warren Buffett. Every family gathering starts with 20 minutes of Jake stories. How many celebrities came to his bar, how he threw the best New Year's party in the city, how he's really making connections and building something special. Meanwhile, I spent 4 years in nursing school, graduated summa cum laude, got my critical care certification, and now I literally hold people's hearts in my hands during surgery. I've lost count of how many lives I've been part of saving. But at family dinners, when I try to share anything about my work, my mother waves her hand dismissively. Oh, Marcus, must you always talk about blood and death? Jake, tell us about that new cocktail menu you're designing? My father is worse. He's told me multiple times that I chose the easy path by going into nursing because it's just following doctor's orders. He says Jake is a real businessman who understands how the world works. The man who serves overpriced drinks to drunk college kids is apparently more accomplished than the son who can perform CPR for 40 minutes straight and bring someone back from the edge of death. Growing up, it was always like this. Jake got a C in math. He's just too creative for regular subjects. I got straight A's. Well, school comes easy to some people. Jake has street smarts. Jake crashed his third car at 22. Boys will be boys. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my own education. Marcus has always been so serious. He could learn to live a little like his brother. The breaking point came last week. I just finished a grueling 16-hour shift where we lost a patient, a father of 3, who reminded me so much of my own dad. I was emotionally drained, physically exhausted, and just needed to hear a familiar voice. I called my mom. Hi, honey. She answered, but I could hear the distraction in her voice. Can I call you back? Jake's here showing us videos from his trip to Vegas. Did you know he got VIP treatment at 3 different clubs? The owner of one even wants to partner with him on something big. Isn't that exciting? I hung up without saying goodbye. That was Thursday. On Saturday, I got a call from my mortgage company asking about the recent changes to my deed. What changes? I hadn't made any changes. After 2 hours of back and forth, they emailed me the documentation. There, clear as day, was an addendum adding Jake as a 50% owner of my house. The house I'd saved for 6 years to buy the house I'd renovated with my own hands on my days off. The signature on the document was mine, or at least it looked exactly like mine. I immediately called Jake. He laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, bro. He said like this was all some big joke. Mom and Dad said you owe me. I've been carrying this family's social reputation for years while you hide in your hospital. Besides, you make good money. You can afford to share. Consider it payment for all the times I've made you look cooler by association. I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking. Look, he continued. It's already done. The paperwork is filed. Mom and Dad said, it's only fair since they helped me out when I was starting the bar, and they never helped you because you never needed it. This evens things out. We are family, Marcus. Family shares. I hung up and immediately called my parents. My mother's response, oh honey, don't be dramatic. Jake just needs some stability in his life. You have your steady job. He's trying to build something. You should be happy to help your brother. My father was more direct. Stop being selfish, Marcus. Your brother has done a lot for this family's image. You wouldn't understand. You're always at that hospital. Jake represents us in the community. This is the least you can do, the least I can do. I save lives for a living. I've held crying families in my arms. I've worked through holidays and birthdays. I've given everything to a profession that demands perfection every single day. But none of that matters because I'm not fun at parties. I don't have Instagram followers. I don't know which bourbon is trendy this month. I've already contacted a lawyer and the police about the forgery. I'm also looking into therapists because I'm starting to realize this isn't normal. The friend who recommended I post here said, this community might understand what I'm going through. I guess my question is, how do you mourn parents who are still alive? How do you accept that no matter how many lives you save, you'll never be enough for the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Update 1, 2 weeks later. I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Your support has meant more to me than you could possibly know. Some of you shared your own stories of being the scapegoat child, and while I'm heartbroken that so many of us have experienced this, it's helped me feel less alone. I have a significant update, and honestly, I'm still processing everything that's happened. After filing the police report for forgery, I hired a forensic accountant on my lawyer's recommendation. She said that in cases of property fraud, there are often other financial irregularities. I thought she was just being thorough. I had no idea what we were about to uncover. The detective assigned to my case, Detective Raymond, called me 3 days after I filed the report. He said they'd need to examine Jake's financial records as part of the investigation. Apparently, the type of forgery Jake committed, specifically forging documents to illegally transfer property ownership, raised some red flags in their financial crimes unit. What they found was so much worse than simple forgery. It turns out, my brother, the successful businessman my parents love to brag about, has been running an illegal alcohol distribution scheme for the past 3 years. He wasn't just managing a bar, he was using it as a front to distribute untaxed alcohol across state lines. The VIP treatment he got in Vegas. He was meeting with suppliers, the big partnership he was excited about, an expansion of his illegal operation. But here's where it connects to my house. Jake had been using fabricated property documents to secure illegal loans and hide assets. My house wasn't his first victim. Detective Raymond found 4 other cases where Jake had forged documents to add himself to property deeds. 2 of his ex-girlfriends, 1 elderly neighbor of my parents, and a cousin who lives in another state. He would use these properties as collateral for loans he never intended to repay, or as addresses for shell companies involved in his distribution network. The investigation moved fast after that. The FBI got involved because of the interstate commerce violations. They raided Jake's bar, his apartment, and several storage units. They found approximately $2.3 million in untaxed alcohol falsified shipping manifests and evidence of money laundering through various accounts. I had to sit down when Detective Raymond told me the next part. Among the seized documents, they found a notebook where Jake had detailed his plan for my house. He intended to use it as collateral for a $400,000 loan to expand his operation into 2 more states. There were notes about how I was too naive and weak to fight back, how our parents would take a side, and how he could guilt the bleeding heart nurse into compliance. He'd written, "Marcus saves lives but can't save himself from family. Perfect target." The word target has been echoing in my head for days. I wasn't his brother in his eyes. I was a mark. My parents found out when the FBI showed up at their house. Jake had listed their address as the official headquarters of one of his shell companies. My mother called me hysterical, screaming about how I'd destroyed the family by involving the police. She actually said, "You couldn't just let him have the house. Now look what you've done." My father was worse. He showed up at the hospital during my shift, causing such a scene that security had to escort him out. He kept shouting about how I was jealous of Jake's success, how I'd fabricated everything because I couldn't stand not being the center of attention. Several of my colleagues witnessed this, including my supervisor Maria, who's been incredibly supportive through all of this. Jake was arrested yesterday. The FBI seized all his assets, including the Bar 3 vehicles and several bank accounts. The forensic accountant estimates he owes nearly $4 million in taxes, fines, and restitution to his victims. He's facing federal charges for tax evasion, wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, and running an illegal alcohol distribution network. His lawyer, court-appointed because his assets are frozen, says he's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted on all charges. I went to see him in jail. I needed to look him in the eye and ask him why. You know what he said? "You got everything easy, Marcus. School job, respectability. I had to work for attention for success. Mom and Dad only loved me because I made them look good. You were just naturally good. You never had to perform for their love. So yeah, I took what I needed. You would never understand what it's like to have to earn your place in this family." I left without saying anything else. There was nothing to say to someone that delusional. The most painful part, my parents are still defending him. They've started a GoFundMe for his legal defense, claiming he's being railroaded by a jealous brother and an overreaching government. They've told extended family that I'm having a mental breakdown, that I've always been unstable, that Jake was just trying to help me manage my finances because I'm not capable. But here's the thing. My colleagues have rallied around me. Maria organized a support system at work. The cardiac surgery team I work with most often took me out to dinner and let me cry over beers. Dr. Chan, our chief cardiac surgeon, brother of the world-famous Dr. Chen, pulled me aside and said, "Marcus, you've saved more lives in your 8 years here than your brother has genuinely helped in his entire life. Don't let anyone, especially not family, make you forget your worth. I'm in therapy now twice a week. My therapist specializes in family trauma and something called scapegoat child syndrome. She says my parents created this dynamic long ago. Jake could only maintain his golden child status by ensuring I stayed the scapegoat, and I unconsciously chose a profession where my worth would be undeniable, where lives literally depend on my competence, because I was desperately trying to prove I had value. I'm not updating this for sympathy. I'm updating because some of you asked and because I want other scapegoat children to know. Sometimes the golden child's pedestal is built on criminal foundations. Sometimes the family narrative is so twisted that truth looks like betrayal. And sometimes saving yourself means letting the whole house of cards collapse, even if you're blamed for the wind that knocked it down. Update 26 weeks later. This update is harder to write than the others, but I promised I'd keep you all informed. And honestly, this community has become a lifeline for me during the darkest period of my life. Jake's case moved through the system faster than expected. He took a plea deal rather than go to trial. The evidence was overwhelming, and his lawyer convinced him that fighting it would only lead to a longer sentence. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, tax evasion, and running an illegal distribution network. The sentence, 6 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The day of sentencing, my parents were there. So was I, sitting on opposite sides of the courtroom. My mother sobbed, theatrically wailing about her baby boy loud enough that the judge had to call for order twice. My father stared at me with such hatred that the bailiff actually positioned himself between us. But here's what made that day bearable. I wasn't alone. Maria and 3 other colleagues from the cardiac unit came with me. They sat on either side of me, a protective wall of people who actually see me for who I am. When my hand started shaking as the victim impact statements were read, Maria grabbed one and held it tight. Yes, victim impact statements. Remember those other properties Jake had forged documents for? Every one of those people testified. The elderly neighbor, Mr. Patterson, broke down crying as he described how Jake had convinced him to sign what he thought were neighborhood watch papers, but were actually deed transfers. One of Jake's ex-girlfriends, Sarah, testified via video link about how Jake had destroyed her credit and left her nearly homeless. When it was my turn to give my statement, I almost couldn't do it. But then, I looked at my colleagues, my real support system, and found my voice. I talked about growing up as the invisible child, about working myself to exhaustion, trying to earn love that was never available, about saving lives while being told I was worth less than someone who served drinks. I talked about the violation of having my own brother see me as nothing more than a mark, a resource to be exploited. My parents tried to interrupt. My mother actually stood up and shouted, "He's lying. Marcus has always been jealous." The judge threatened to have her removed. After the sentencing, there was a restitution hearing. The government had seized approximately $1.8 million in assets from Jake's various operations. After taxes, fines, and legal fees, there was $890,000 to be divided among his victims. As the largest single victim due to the attempted property theft and intended fraud, using my house as collateral, I was awarded $420,000. I want to be clear, I would trade every penny to have had a brother who actually loved me, parents who actually saw me. But that was never an option. Was it? The money is currently sitting in an account. I haven't touched it. My therapist, Dr. Williams, says this is common. Victims of family fraud often feel guilty about restitution, as if they're profiting from their family's downfall. But she reminds me, I didn't cause this. Jake chose to commit crimes. My parents chose to enable him. I just chose to stop being a victim. Speaking of my parents, they've escalated their campaign against me. They've been calling extended family, telling everyone I'm mentally unstable, that I planted evidence that I'm trying to steal Jake's rightful inheritance. The inheritance, by the way, from parents who are still alive. The entitlement is staggering. They showed up at my house last week at 2 a.m., pounding on my door demanding I fix this. My father shouted that I was dead to them, that I was no son of his. My mother wailed that I had killed her baby, that Jake would die in prison because of me. I called the police. They were given a warning for disturbance of the peace. The next day, I filed for a restraining order. It was granted temporarily and will be reviewed for a permanent order next month. My parents are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. You'd think this would devastate me, and in a way it does, but mostly, I feel free. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to earn their love. I'm not competing with a ghost of who Jake pretended to be. I'm just Marcus, cardiac nurse, good colleague, and apparently, according to my last performance review, an invaluable asset to the cardiac care team whose compassion and skill have saved countless lives. My colleagues have become my chosen family. We've had dinner together every Sunday since the trial. Dr. Chan and his wife invited me to their Thanksgiving. Maria's kids call me Uncle Marcus now. The nursing staff has started a tradition where we celebrate each other's wins no matter how small. Last week, they threw me a party because I successfully completed a particularly difficult central line placement. It was a small thing, but they cheered like I'd won the Nobel Prize. Dr. Williams has been helping me understand that my entire life has been shaped by emotional abuse and neglect. She says children who grow up like I did often go into helping professions desperately trying to prove their worth by saving others because they couldn't save themselves. But she also says that breaking the cycle like I'm doing now is the hardest and bravest thing someone can do. I've also started attending a support group for adults who were scapegoat children. Hearing their stories, sharing mine, realizing that so many of us have the same wounds, it's been transformative. We're all successful in our fields: doctors, teachers, engineers, social workers. Yet we all struggled with the same feeling of never being enough for the people who should have loved us most. The group has taught me something crucial. The scapegoat child often threatens the family system simply by existing. We're the truth tellers, the ones who refuse to play along with the dysfunction. Our very presence challenges the narrative. Jake needed me to be less than so he could be more than. My parents needed me to be the problem so they didn't have to face their own failures. And when I finally refused to play my assigned role, the whole system collapsed. Final update. 2 months later, I'm writing this final update from a different place physically and emotionally. So much has changed since my last post that I hardly recognize my life anymore. And I mean that in the best possible way. First, the legal updates. The permanent restraining order against my parents was granted. They're prohibited from any contact with me for the next 3 years. They violated the temporary order twice, showing up at the hospital and calling me from different numbers, so the judge had no hesitation in making it permanent. They've also been charged with harassment and witness intimidation as they tried to pressure me to recant my testimony. They each received probation and mandatory counseling. Jake is serving his time at a federal facility about 4 hours away. He's written me 6 letters. I've read none of them. My therapist has them in case I ever want to read them in a therapeutic setting, but right now, I'm not ready. Maybe I never will be, and that's okay. The extended family has split into camps. Some believe my parents' version of events that I'm a jealous, unstable person who destroyed the family. Others have reached out to say they always suspected something was off about the dynamic, that they saw how I was treated differently, but didn't know how to intervene. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, told me she's been in therapy herself, processing how she enabled my parents by staying silent. She apologized and asked if we could rebuild our relationship. We're taking it slow, but we had coffee last week, and it was nice. Now for the positive changes, I used part of the restitution money to completely renovate my home, not because it needed it, but because I needed to reclaim it. Every room Jake's presence had tainted has been transformed. My colleagues helped me paint, and we turned it into a celebration of new beginnings. My living room wall now has a photo collage of the cardiac team and the families we've helped. It's my wall of chosen family and actual impact. I also used some of the money to establish a fund at the hospital for cardiac patients who can't afford their medications. It's called the Second Chances Fund. In 6 weeks, we've helped 12 families. Every time I sign off on a disbursement, I think about Jake claiming I owed him for being the fun one. Well, keeping people alive so they can have fun with their families seems like a better investment. But the biggest change is the support group I started. After seeing how much the scapegoat support group helped me, I realized there were probably healthcare workers with similar experiences. I started Healthcare Heroes from Our Homes Were working on the name, a support group specifically for medical professionals who grew up as scapegoat children. Our first meeting had 3 people. Our last meeting had 24. We meet every Thursday evening at the hospital. We talk about how our childhood trauma drives us to save others, how we seek validation through our work, how we struggle with imposter syndrome, despite our achievements, but we also celebrate each other's wins, support each other through losses, and remind each other that our worth isn't determined by our productivity or our family's approval. Dr. Chan attended one meeting as a guest speaker. He talked about how many healthcare workers come from dysfunctional families drawn to healing because we couldn't heal our own homes. He said something that stuck with me. You cannot save people who don't want to be saved, but you can save yourself. And in doing so, become someone who can truly save others. Last month, something remarkable happened. A patient's daughter recognized me from one of my mom's Facebook rants. She's been posting about her ungrateful son. Despite the restraining order preventing direct contact, The daughter pulled me aside and said, "I know you. You're the nurse whose family downed him for standing up to fraud. I want you to know you saved my father's life last year, and now you've shown me it's okay to stand up to my toxic family too. You're a hero twice over. My colleagues have become more than just chosen family. They've become my foundation." Maria and her husband invited me to be their youngest son's godfather. The ceremony is next month. Dr. Chan is recommending me for Advanced Cardiac Care Certification Program, saying I have the rare combination of technical skill and emotional intelligence that makes exceptional cardiac nurses. The entire unit pitched in to get me a leather-bound journal with Marcus the Heart We Choose engraved on it. I cried for an hour, but perhaps the most profound change has come from an unexpected source. Last week, my mother's sister Linda forwarded me a letter my mother had written to her, but never sent. Linda found it while helping clean out some of my grandmother's things. It was dated 2 weeks after Jake's arrest. In it, my mother admitted she always knew Jake was troubled, that she and my father had enabled him because they were afraid of losing him, that they pushed me away because my success highlighted their failures as parents. She wrote Marcus never needed us, so we convinced ourselves he didn't deserve us. The truth is, we didn't deserve him. Linda asked if I wanted her to tell my mother she'd found the letter. I said, no, that letter was my mother's truth in a moment of clarity, but she chose to bury it and continue the narrative that I'm the villain. That's her choice. I'm making mine. I'm choosing to see my worth through the eyes of the 94-year-old patient who calls me his angel. I'm choosing to define family as the people who show up, not the people who share DNA. I'm choosing to measure success by lives saved, not by parental approval. I'm choosing to use my pain to help others heal. My therapist says I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. The scapegoat who was never enough has become someone who is more than enough. Not for my parents, not for Jake, but for the people who matter. My patients, my colleagues, my support group, and most importantly, myself. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, you are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not the problem. Sometimes the family system is so broken that the only way to heal is to leave it behind entirely. It's not giving up. It's growing up. It's not betrayal. It's survival. And sometimes the family that chooses you is infinitely more valuable than the family you were born into. My name is Marcus. I'm 31 years old. I'm a cardiac nurse. I save lives for a living. I am no longer the scapegoat. I am no longer seeking approval from people incapable of giving it. I am finally enough. And to Jake, if you ever read this from federal prison, you were right about one thing. I never had to perform for our parents' love. Not because it came easily, but because it was never available to me at any price. The difference is, you destroyed yourself trying to earn something that was freely given to you. While I built myself up despite being denied it, you had their love and lost everything. I never had their love and gained everything. The heart that was never enough. It's beating just fine. Strong, steady, and surrounded by people who actually value it. Thank you all for following my journey. Your support has meant everything. End note. The support group Healthcare Heroes from Hard Homes now has 47 regular members and has expanded to 3 weekly meetings. We've started a mentorship program for healthcare students from similar backgrounds. The Second Chances Fund has helped 58 families in 4 months. I still work my shifts in the cardiac unit. I still save lives, but now I do it as someone who knows his worth isn't determined by those who refuse to see it, but by those whose hearts literally depend on mine. And sometimes late at night in the cardiac ICU, when I'm monitoring a patient whose heart is fighting to keep beating, I think about how hearts are remarkable things. They can be broken, diseased, attacked, and neglected. But with the right care, the right support, and the right environment, they can heal, grow stronger, and beat with a rhythm all their own. Mine finally does.